Snug Valley Farm in Hardwick, to give us an update. And we will, I think, start just so that you know who we all are and maybe we can have you guys introduce yourself. But why don't we go around the table since we have some newer members of the committee. I am David Durfee. I represent Shaftesbury, Sunderland, Glastonbury, and Bennington County.
Hi, I'm Heather Serpenot, Vice Chair. I represent Windsor 4, Barnard, Pomfret, Bridgewater, West Hartford.
Hey there, John O'Brien, we're alternate members. Frank Burke, Cabot Danville, Peachum.
Richard Nelson, Orleans 1, which is Derby.
Jed Lipsky, Lamoille 1, Stowe.
I'm Leland Morgan. I represent all of Grand Isle County and the western portion of the town of Milton.
And Representative Boslin will be joining us a little bit later. She's from West Windsor. Sidonia, our committee assistant.
Thank you.
So welcome, Dan, and please jump right in.
So welcome. Thank you for inviting us in today. As the chair said, we were here 2 years ago to make a proposal to the legislature that really started out of the Senate Agriculture Committee. As I think a number of you know, I have kind of long-standing ties to the building and to the community. I was just saying that my office was right over there and down there, and I looked out at this window. I think this was the Commerce Committee back in my day. So I was in the Legislative Council from 87 to 92. And worked on the Dairy Compact starting at that time, and really chased the Northeast Dairy Compact for about 10 years, from the beginning to the bitter end, with then Representative and then Senator Starr. And I've worked in that field pretty continuously since that time in milk price regulation. Roger Albee, who some of you are probably familiar with, was the Secretary of Agriculture under Governor Douglas. And I worked with him in the milk pricing world. And Roger called me up one day and asked me if I would backstop his attempt to take strolling of the heifers, which many of you are probably familiar with, had kind of reached the end of its working life in COVID, and they were going to take the assets they have and put it into a new institute that was devoted to promoting agri-technology tools for smaller scale farms. So he asked me to be the legal beaver for that effort. And Roger, being Roger somehow, and I'm still trying to figure out how, managed to get me to take over. So here I am, for better or worse, kind of changing gears, less and less with milk price regulation, more with this venture, which is really quite interesting. As we'll talk about, the legislature with some other funding put together a pilot project for virtual fencing. And with me today is Ben Notterman, who was really the first farmer that employed the technology 2 years ago. So he's the kind of the test case. So I thought you guys should hear from him. And we have done a series of projects and devoted really, as I said, to promoting ag tech tool use. It's really for two purposes. One is to improve the operational sustainability of farms, financial and environmental, but also the science is there that small farms can help with the challenge of climate change. Instead of being contributors to climate difficulties, farms can help. And I'm not saying they are contributors, but in the vision is to enable them to assist with ameliorating climate change. So that's our mission. And the action steps that we've taken is really right here. Do academic research and in combination with our on-farm research and development to identify early stage and established tools that don't find their way into Vermont, which is really Roger's vision, that the agri-tech developments have not found their way to Vermont for a variety of reasons. So the objective is to identify those technologies and bring them into testing on small farms such as Ben's. In addition, and I think this is a big piece that the work we've done has illustrated, is the need for financing support as a part of that. And then the need for outreach, collaboration, and education. So right around the time I was approaching the legislature, I was really doing the due diligence on virtual fencing as the first technology. So I was really the test for the Institute itself, as well as the test of virtual fencing. It talked among my network, which included Kimberly Kagan, who was with the Extension Service at UVM, and Kimberly hooked me up with, she can't say that anymore. Kimberly made the connection with Ben and a couple of other producers, and we get started. So what I want to do today is just give you a little bit more introduction about the way this has worked out. Then we'll hear from Ben, and also I've got a YouTube from a goat operation that is a nice visual of how it works. And then I'll come back in and with a little more deep dive into what we found and where we're headed from here. So that's kind of the high level introduction. The technology itself is equipment that's provided by No Fence. The name of the company is No Fence, and the slide with the cow is theirs. So the basic idea, and so the members of the committee who are here will be familiar, but just to go through it, the basic idea, the slide on the right shows what you will see on your phone if you adopt this technology. It's a cell-based technology that uses a cell phone, and Ben has brought the collar. So the collar is hung around the animal. In this case, this is a cow collar. The cell phone it allows you to program the collar to the virtual boundaries, and that the blue outline is a virtual boundary. So you're using virtual boundaries to replace post and wire fence. And that's what the No Fence slide is meant to illustrate. The animal receives an auditory signal when it approaches 1 meter to the line. And if the animal is moving faster or getting even closer, the sound increases in both its frequency and loudness. And then if they breach the line, then they get shock. One of the great advantages is they get shocked on the way out, but they don't get shocked on the way in. So that the age-old problem of cows worrying about getting back in is removed, and that's a big advantage. Another good thing about the collars is it's a geolocation device, so you know where your animals are. And that's actually what tipped Bobby and Senator Westman to this. The smiles on their face when we're talking about all the cows they had chased back in their day without knowing where they were. That with this, you know where your animals are. And you could just see I'm in. They saw that they were in. And that has proven to be a repetitive statement by the operators.
Questions from Representative Morgan?
Are the cows fast learners?
Yeah, good question. Ben will speak to that, but the answer is cows, sheep, goats, they're all fast learners. It's quite remarkable to observe. I run a small herd of beef cows, and so have some firsthand 20 odd years experience with working with animals and working with this. And it's quite remarkable to see how the herd instinct kicks in. Some pick it up faster, the others follow, all of that. But they're really, Ben will speak to better than I. I kind of left out one step. You program to the collar, then the collar sends that signal up to the GPS satellite, and then the GPS establishes the connection with the collar, and that sets the boundary. So you have that communication boundary set, and then the animals learn that. That's what they learn. And then the information is provided on the phone where they are. Those are the little circles there, and also where they've been over time. Yeah. Is that okay, Ms.? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to-
So is there no base antenna at the farm?
Correct. It's a cellular based.
Cellular base.
Yeah.
So if you are in parts of Craftsbury, it won't work.
Yeah, we'll get into that. That is,
I'll give that the rundown.
Yeah, okay.
yeah, that's what will be a repeated statement from both of us. It works good if you got cell service. It don't work good if you don't have cell service. Bottom line. Yeah. Yeah. Bottom line. But works good if you got cell service. The original setup, I got some money out of the Dairy Business Innovation Center and the Linalac Foundation to try this out on cows. That's Ben's herd there. They're all lined up. And the reason they're all lined up is the virtual line is right in front of them. And the one that's a little bit turned to the side, you can see the collar. It's to your right.
Yeah.
That one is just getting programmed in. And then it will back up and join the line. And it's really quite a sight. The first time you see it, it's really, where's the fence kind of hits you in the head. Then when the legislature came in, in the neck, I guess, but yeah. The story really started to move that this technology might be available for use as a vegetation management practice, not just as an improvement for cattle operations, more efficient, establish virtual fence 5 minutes instead of an hour and a half in simple terms to set a boundary. So I consulted with Kimberly again, and we established a relationship with a goat herding operation down in Londonderry. And we did a pilot. This is Magic Mountain ski area down in Londonderry. So we tried it out on a ski area, 2 utilities up my way, central Vermont, and sheep on a solar array. So we branched out and ended up with 3 cattle farm grazing trials, 7 smaller ruminant vegetation management trials, and 1 goat dairy farm trial, which was really kind of an add-on that is really quite interesting how well that worked. So in summary terms, that's where we are. 11 projects, 5 operators is the project that we've run over the last 2 years. The base funding came out of here, the legislature, plus Dairy Business Innovation Center. Then, as I said, the Linalac Foundation kicked in some money. Their interest is in clean water in this deal, and Ben will speak some to that one of the chief advantages of the system is you can establish exclusion zones much more effectively than with conventional fencing. And I think that, we're hoping that was the case, and I don't think I'm overstating it to say that it proved out better than our expectations. So that's a highlight piece of this. The sleeper issues on the goat farm. The goat operators used the equipment last summer between July and November and found that their milk production increased because their ability to improve their browse was such that it shut up in the milk production. And their milk's worth a lot of money. Their goat milk's worth a lot of money. So the no fence is pretty clear. They don't think the equipment should be used in the barn because the collies get banged around on the stanchion. So they're discouraged that, but there is a goat trial in Pennsylvania, and based on that, those leap thought, let's give it a try up here, and I supported that with DBIC, and it really works. So I'd like to see if I can pursue that, and kind of handpick a dairy farm where the animals are really well managed, and it may be workable to allow the collars to work in a milking operation. So that's the other kind of interesting sleeper issue.
Representative O'Brien?
Dan, I remember you could just redraw your borders right on your phone.
Yeah.
It's possible also to create essentially go into that and create a donut, so that you're like, oh, here's, a wetland or something. And so you've actually got some areas within that are also off limits.
Yeah, so inside the perimeter, inside the perimeter fence, you can then choose the exclusion zone function inside the app, trace out where you want to keep them out of, like power poles, wetland, wet runs, vernal areas where there's surface water, and that surface water can change throughout the season. We've seen some pretty crazy summers. So first pass might be dry, second rotation might be a lot of surface water. You keep them out just so there's no pugging, no no erosion. It's very, very useful.
So as many as you want.
You can do as many as needed. I mean, you're not limited to anything. You could do like 30 exclusion polygons inside your, overall perimeter.
Yeah.
There's no-
Theoretically, like an orchard, you could draw around trees, right?
Yeah, I haven't tried the orchard yet, or in an orchard, but I imagine it would work.
And then on the banks to keep the animals out of them.
Yeah,
That's really what Cree was interested in, that piece of it, and that's proving out as well. So your donut is good, take one of those circles, draw a circle around it, that animal will leave relatively quickly.
Representative Nelson?
Thank you, Chairman. So rotational grazing, I imagine this works really good to move your paddocks along. And can you create like a lane the cows would travel down, a lane to get to a next paddock?
Lanes are a little tricky on it. We were using it in place of our step-in posts and reels like Gallagher.
Yeah.
Post poly reels for daily moves, and all our cattle move every day. So we were using the virtual fencing in place of those, and we were creating paddocks that would be like 2-day paddocks. So the water point would be here.
Yeah,
First day they'd have this section that includes the water point. The next day they would have this next section. So we'd move the water point every 2 days so they could go back to water. We did try, we were forced to try to build some lanes in 23 when we had that crazy flooding in July. The group that we had on these collars, I physically couldn't get to for 4 or 5 days. There were no roads to get there, and it was 4 miles from the home place. So I couldn't move their water ahead, but I narrowed up their access to the water and just kept moving them further and further up through the pasture so they could stay in feed and not go hungry. They just had to travel back for water. I did that to try to eliminate pugging and surface disturbance. That was my first experience doing it, and I made it a little too narrow, the laneway back. It's got to be wider than your conventional laneways with hardwire fence.
okay. And do you run a perimeter fence around the outside of your pastures or
So all of our pastures have 3-wire high tensile
perimeter?
perimeter fence, very, very hot. So we're really using these for the interior divider fences. So we strip graze, so we step them forward every day or every other day, depending on the season and the prescription we're doing there. So they are still contained. If they get out of the virtual fence, they're still contained.
I find it really intriguing. Now, you couldn't get to your cows, but you could still manage them.
That was a saver. I mean, it probably saved me what, $300 in a reel and polywire. They would have blown through that reel. They can put pressure on it, it breaks. I have to replace it, and then they go to the grass. But I could keep managing them while not being able to physically be there, which was definitely an unforeseen benefit. Like nobody expected that, and I didn't expect to not be able to get to them for 4 or 5 days. So
Yeah,
I think we expected that was a possibility. You could sit in your office and do that.
yeah, but not necessarily from a natural disaster.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
That part
point
was,
of view,
that was
yeah.
a real advantage, direct
Yeah.
advantage, yeah.
and I have a name of a very good grass-fed organic dairy herd that maybe you want to reach out to.
Great, that's why we're here.
Phenomenal.
And that's, so we'll get to that in the back end here. Just to kind of complete my windup, for cattle, we had Ben's Farm. The Harrison Home Farm is an organic dairy over in Whiting, I think over in Middlebury area. Senator Westman is trying to bring his operation back. So he tried it out on as I said, you can't use it in the barn. So it's just a non-lactating cow. So Senator Westman is pasturing some animals on his property for that purpose. And very important, his experience, mixed experience because of cell service problems. And then there were 2 dairy farms involved because of the DBI, Dairy Business Innovation Center. So that was the spread on the cattle, and on vegetation, it fills out the box. 2 co-ops, transmission line, and it's a sub-transmission line because the width of the distribution line right away is arguably too narrow. We're gonna try that out, I hope this summer. You end up with the signaling bouncing off itself if it's too narrow. The ski areas I mentioned, a knotweed trial, which is really coming out of the Linalac Foundation on a riverbank down in southern Vermont, the West River. It just aimed at knotweed. And I've got this awesome video of what that looks like, but it's a little hard to get up on the screen. If we have time, I'll try again. And the solar array, as I mentioned, and then a trial with Shelburne Farms. Again, a wet pasture area stemming from the Linalac Foundation's involvement, and the predator control issue came up. That's another, that cell service and predators is and cost is the problems. Coyotes are a big problem at Shelburne Farms, and they slaughtered the lambs and ended the pilot quite quickly. So that was a big illustration of that issue. And then the goat dairy. And so Ben, should we let's see the Doe's Leap video first, and then you? What do you?
Whatever you want to do. It's up to you.
Make a decision.
You're driving the ship.
You say that loosely. Okay. So if you guys.
Representative O'Brien, while we're.
Dan, I just want to know, while you're transitioning, would it be possible to use this technology to essentially like a cattle drive or a goat drive to move animals, say, from, one side of a town to another? If you just kind of kept drawing the pasture as they went and had a sheepdog or herder?
I think it'd be possible. Be a lot of coordination, and there's a whole lot of temptation for animals to veer, And if you get one who's a little bit more strong-headed than another, doesn't mind bumping through the line, they're going to drag a bunch, or could potentially drag a bunch more of the follower group with them. So there could, I think it could be done, but I think
Very good.
there could be some challenges along it.
Sidonian?
We might need,
Wow.
So my kids.
That was graphic.
I did too. That was animals.
That was hurting my eyes.
Do anything about.
you have a question?
Maybe while we're waiting,
Representative Lipsky, go ahead.
yeah. Dan, I was involved in this was not domestic, this was over in the Okavango Delta where we were collaring elephant herds with transmitters for a trans-frontier conservation area. And we had to dart them. You don't go and handle something that's several times. But it was very critical to have that collar, the transmitter, and it was all done by satellite.
The location,
Fixed
geolocation.
on top.
Yeah.
And this looks like it's dangling.
Yeah.
It's like a modern day cowbell, essentially.
So, but that dangles under their
Yeah.
neck as opposed to fixed. These were
Yeah.
both riveted and I strapped.
Yeah, but my guess is it's, however many how many years ago was. Yeah.
2004.
Yeah. Permutations since. There's actually solar collectors on.
Oh,
Yeah. On that? Yeah.
No, next, not in your experiences at that point, next.
how you did.
All right, have you got the video?
That's an understatement.
Queued up here?
Let's see if we can get the sound working.
So do we have a problem, Sidonia, if we want to hear the sound on this video?
Yeah, you can't hear the sound.
They won't be able to hear that sound.
No
If
sound?
you turn on the audio on your computer, then it's just gonna create the feedback loop.
Give it a try.
No.
At least
Oh, farmer call.
My pulling guard. I listen to what Frank tells me to do.
Ben can narrate.
So they're drawing some high tensile boundaries here. So this is a a slight, I think the small ruminant collars have a slightly different app interface than the large animal collars, or they just have a newer version than I was using. But it's essentially the same thing. So they're making their 4 points to make their boundary, and then their goats are inside that. And pretty much they were able to increase their milk production by the frequency of their graze and making paddocks so that the animals, because goats browse more than they graze grass like cows or sheep do. So they were all about browse. So they were able to make these long paddocks and odd shaped paddocks using the virtual fence to keep the goats where they need to be. That would have been a very challenging situation to put out net fence to try to string, net fence through the brambles or through the brush. That would be, in my mind, a nightmare job. So.
This is actually the training.
Oh, is this their training pen?
Yeah. So that if they had the four corners, the perimeter fence is you set the virtual fence outside of 3 parts of the perimeter fence. So that the fixed fence is serving as the boundary for 3 sides, and then the 4th side is the virtual. And that's what they're trying out right now. They're testing the one place where there's no hardwired fence. And that's how they learn off the first line. And then it takes 2 to 3 days.
That's the
to
hard
implement.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's on 3 sides, and then the 4th side is open. Sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is this the first time these goats have had any experience with it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
That's it.
wasn't sure if that was just how they learned every time or the new boundary.
No, this is once they're learning the system.
The first time, okay.
Yeah, and then once they learn the system, they find it, and then they'll hear the sound and they know what's happening.
Okay.
Representative O'Brien?
Ben, how does the shock compare to your, say, your hot wire?
Quite a lot less. If you've ever seen a cow touch a hot wire fence, they hop back pretty heavily. With this, I did walk through the boundary this summer holding it. I should have taken a video for, maybe I'll do it this coming summer for like social media, just to show like it's not that bad. Like I walked through it, it tingles, but it's not a
220.
no, it's not a 60+ joule shock from, a 10,000 kilovolt, 10,000 volt fence. So, but it's more directly applied to the skin. So it's like it's definitely a larger surface area. So it has to be less powerful.
You're up.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
I gotta put you up. Oh. I'm the older I get, the more I kind of recognize my foibles. So I'm promoting an agriculture technology venture. And as you can tell, I'm not particularly technology savvy.
Ben, how much are those GPS transponders?
So these are at roughly about $300 from No Fence if you're to buy the unit. So that comes with the housing, the batteries in the bottom, the spec strap, and then for X number of units, you get a battery charger along with it.
Oh, it's a rechargeable battery.
Again.
It is a rechargeable battery, and on this side of the collar is a small solar panel to help offset the power usage of the unit itself. And if this shouldn't shock anybody, it's not in any active pasture, although that would have been funny had I done that for setting the perimeter. So if you want to pass that around, you can have a look at it, feel the weight.
How do I get back?
They're a little cumbersome. The first day the cattle will have them on, they're like, what is this? Jumping around, being all wild, trying to run away from this thing. And then by, 2 or 3 hours later, the shock is passed and they're calm and they've gone back to eating. All right. So, this was a 2-year pilot study with Agritech Institute for Small Farms. The funding came from, as Dan said, from the legislature and Lintilac, and then a little bit maybe from BHCB, or maybe I'm wrong on that.
The VHCB funding is the legislative.
Okay,
Big
so
chunk.
one and the same.
Yeah.
All right. So, here's a field visit, Mercedes from, no offense, Kimberly Hagan, Dan and myself. We were out observing, our herd. Okay. So we were out observing our herd. The first season we had about 63 or 65 collars. This past season we had 40. Just, we gave back some of the collars so more farms could join the pilot. We were the only one, I think, the first season.
Yes,
Yeah,
well,
so,
you're the only one that carried through the whole season.
okay. So this is inside my app on my phone. This is what it looks like. And then here are the cattle grazing with the collars on. And you can see that they're not affected by the collar. They adapt to it and become used to it. And each animal is represented by one of those little white circles there. So inside the app, there's lots of interesting data that I've always been curious about, but had never a way to measure. So like the green areas you see on there are what we call heat maps. So this is where the cattle have spent a lot of time. Like obviously, you know, this around their water tub or their mineral tub, they're going to congregate or in the shade. But a lot of that is not by either of those. So that lets us look at what had the cattle's attention. Was it a certain plant, maybe clover, or was it orchard grass? Like what drew their attention? Why did they stay there for so long when they could have gone a lot of other spots in the paddock itself? There's a lot of, and I've not formulated any conclusions on this data. I'm just like sucking this data in, trying to figure out why they're interested in certain areas and not other areas. And I've heard talked to a lot of agronomists, like cattle are really good at monitoring and self-regulating what they need for mineral intake. If they know where to find it, they go to it. So this, if I can figure out what they're going to eat, will let me know what mineral they're telling me they're deficient in or whatever the nutrient that they might be deficient in.
Representative O'Brien.
So it's concentration plus time.
So this is, you can set it at different intervals. Each collar pings the satellite every either 5, 10, or 15 minutes. I think there's those three choices. And then so it accumulates like, oh, there was a whole bunch of animals in this one zone for a lot of pings to the satellite to locate it. So that's how they generate these heat maps, which is essentially where they were in concentration for a period of time. So you can look back over 24 hours, 5 days, and 1 week. So if they're in like the same paddock, ours are not in the same paddock for that long. So, but you can zoom out on the overall property and really see. You can see, are they grazing evenly? Because if it's even, then that green is fairly even across. So it just gives you a little feedback as the operator how to maybe change things and move things around. Let's see. All right, so here's our training paddock. A couple different versions of that. So as Dan was saying before, 3 sides of the training paddock are a conventional hardwire fence or a conventional physical fence. And then the boundary would be here. That would be the virtual boundary. So the cattle really can't tell. Obviously, they can't tell it's there until they learn the auditory signal and then the ensuing shock if they go too far. It really only takes 2 days, maybe 3, for the slow learners in the group to figure out like, oh, there's the sound. And then shortly after that, I get hurt and I can't go past that. Or that's not comfortable. I'm going to stay with my buddies. I think the learning curve for the technology is actually longer for the operator than it is for the cattle. They got it figured out. So anything that goes wrong is not their fault. It's definitely the operator's fault. There was a steep learning curve for us on how to transition the cattle from paddock to paddock with minimizing stress. We got to figure it out after the first 4 or 5 days where you overlay the new paddock with the old paddock, transfer them in the app to the new paddock, and then they drift into the new grass on their own, and then you just slide the back line up to the existing line.
So you don't slide it like I'm driving them.
No, you can't use it. It's not fast enough in real time to like drive them essentially or push them. Like you can't walk it like you could a polywire line.
Yeah.
And we had to do that a few times to get them to transition to the next paddock. That's when we were laying paddocks side by side. And then because of the updating process, some collars would update really quick, and some would take 10 or 15 minutes, and there was a lot of stress created in the herd, like some were able to cross, some weren't. Some took longer and they were trying to join their friends, but they keep getting buzzed at the line and are reluctant to cross it. So we figured out if you overlay and just let them drift into the new grass every time, that there's no angst or stress. So let's see what we got here.
What are the yellow ones that?
The yellow, so, okay, that's a great example. So that was either the battery, this was our first year, I think, either the battery hadn't quite seated in the collar, or it was having a communication cell connectivity issue. We've had both, so I can't say for certain which
These are screenshots
from inside the app
yeah.
on my phone. So I wish they would do interactive and show you around in the app on there, but I'm not that technological.
Representative Nelson?
We're gonna get there.
What are the warranties on those?
I don't know the warranty on
This 1 year.
1 year.
The useful life, they think, is between 5 and 10 years. But they're warranted for.
And it's not prorated after that.
No,
You know, the SCR collars that we put on dairy cows or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do they have a lease program?
not yet. Yeah. Okay, but these are our questions after, these are more programmed.
Okay.
Ben's the farm operation, and we hear from him, and then I go through some of those issues.
Yeah.
Why don't we let Ben
Yeah.
go through his slides?
All right. All right, let's go. Okay, so here we are. So these are two parcels that we grazed with the collars. As you can see, it can get pretty cluttered. All of those blue polygons are each a different paddock. And this was like the first generation of the app where you couldn't necessarily color code paddocks or remove first rotation, second rotation. So it obviously gets very cluttered. And they've made a lot of advancements now, so you can turn layers on and off, like on a GIS system or a mapping system. So you can say, and you can color code. Again, this was a few generations back. So these are how we're overlaying and sharing boundaries. So the boundary lines would probably go back and forth or vary, 3 to 4 meters back once you move the back line up to the new paddock. I don't know if that's clear, but like there's a little bit of variation in the shared boundary line from one paddock to the other.
Representative Lipsky, question?
Ben,
Yes.
we had testimony last year on agroforestry. And I noticed in most all of the slides, there's portions of woodland. The first photograph had a lot of grazing. Any thoughts on the grasses within a forested pasture?
Yeah.
Is there different nutrition or different inches or?
Most of our ground is all open, traditional farm ground or pasture ground. I would love to be able to find a grazing scenario with for silvopasturing and for silvopasturing. But I haven't found it yet. There are a lot of benefits both ways. Keeps the cool season grasses rocking more through the warm season, like end of July, early August, when we usually see a growth slump in our typical native cool season grasses. So there's a lot of benefits there.
If I could, the goat operation, very big in silvopasturing. They found that unlike with a polywire fence, can't get in among the trees and set a decent boundary. With this, you can. So they could go up into the edge of their wooded land, and the goats, it had two benefits. One, they took advantage of the pasture in the trees, and the second is they could go in there for shade during the day, and because you could observe that that's what they were doing, and they believe that that's part of the reason they had such a significant increase in the value of their browse that showed up in the milk was from that piece of silver pasture. So,
Because the goats weren't heading back to the barn early or wanting to go back to the barn to get shade.
to get out of the sun. Yeah. They just, yeah. Good question.
All right, so here's an example of a few different paddocks. So this is like when you you delineate a paddock and you can go into the paddock details. It gives you the acres and hectares, and there's about 2.5 acres per hectare. So this gives you an idea of the acreage you're using, which for us isn't always exact because we're actually setting the boundaries of the side, the side boundaries outside our hardwire perimeter fence so that they'll graze right up to the wire fence. We're really using it for the front line and back line. So our areas are a little bit misrepresented. There we go. But it's definitely a useful tool to figure out exactly how much ground are they covering every day? What's your stocking rate per acre or hectare? And then giving that ground proper rest time after grazing, like a longer rest period for the grass to regrow. So there's a lot of interesting data in here. And it is a large labor savings. We did some number saving or some calculations where it was almost it was about 45 minutes a day labor savings by not having to go set a wire, like physically go there, drive there, set a wire, move the cattle ahead, go pick up the previous wire, roll that up, move their minerals and water forward. So we were just able to bump them forward every other day, or bump them forward and then every other day bring their minerals and their water tub to catch up with them. So over the course of a season, we are typically 180 days. So that's at least 90 hours of labor savings per year or per grazing season at $30 an hour between employee contributions, all the associated stuff. It adds up really quick. And so maybe I'm off. I think it was 300 hours. I'd have to closer to
Every day versus.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So looking at the payback on these collars, it's every week you're pretty much saving in labor costs almost what one of these collars costs to purchase. So on top of the purchase cost, there is like the yearly subscription for the I think it's $10 a collar for the software backend stuff.
Representative Nelson?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Are you running these on Calcat pairs or
These are on stalkers.
stalkers? So
So
how is your rate of gain? Did it improve your rate of gain?
it's hard to say for sure because the last 2 summers were not anything typical.
Absolutely.
Because the grass was way less potent, had way less nutrition, way less minerals because of the massive amount of water we got. So I can't say for sure if it would increase our gain. I think it would, but there's definitely a labor saving cost for the operator in the overall picture.
For those of us who aren't actively managing dairy or cattle herds, can you explain what rate of gain is?
So rate of gain is how many pounds do they add per day? And I shoot for about 2 pounds a day on good, high quality grass, especially for our 6 to 9 weight cattle. So 600 pounds to 900 pound cattle. And obviously their growth curve slows as they get bigger because they're not adding as much weight, but their nutrient intake needs to increase to support and maintain their larger size. So we shoot for 2 pounds. I think the last 2 seasons we got a little under that. We were like a 1.75 in 23 and 1.7 in 24. So we're getting there, but we're not, some of my groups perform better than others, but that also has a lot to do with geography and the soil types and the pasture they're on and the forage that's there. So there's lots of variables.
Yeah, interesting. And Dan, you may be going to cover this in wrapping up, but are you, at some point, the trial period will end? I'm curious to know what your thoughts are going ahead, having
Yeah,
involved and seen the results.
I'm a fan. I am definitely a fan. I would like to purchase a set of collars, whether it's these collars or, that we've been using or new ones. New ones are a little out of reach. If you were to buy 40 or 50 of them, that's a pretty good charge of money to come up with in one shot. But I think Dan's got some ideas on that stuff.
Yeah.
But
It's
it's
transition.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
But I want to continue on with them. I think that this is, for Vermont, the no fence collars are going to be, quite useful for operations. There are other, GPS virtual fence collar brands out there, no fence, or I'm sorry, Fence, so fence with a V. They're out west, but they don't want to deal with any herd sizes under 500. And they set up, this is where you had the base station question. They come set up antennas all over a ranch, whether it's 10,000 acres or 50,000 or 100,000 acres that essentially take the place of the cell service. But that's a whole lot of infrastructure to invest in. So they don't want to touch a herd that's under 500 head, which there's very few beef cattle herds in Vermont that are grazing that are over 500 head, maybe two.
I don't know of any.
I know of maybe two, but
That's why we want no fence.
so the no fence is great for like most of our property that we lease and graze is non-contiguous. So it's like 40 acres here, 50 acres here, 30, which would be really hard to do with a large group, that 500 head, which is not attainable there. But this cohort that we've been grazing of our stockers, they start the season together and they graze the entire season together. So we're not adding any to this herd or this group, and we're not taking any away. So they really kind of form a cohort and graze the season together.
All right, we've got about 5 more minutes, and so Dan, I think I had a few more slides.
Okay.
Go through.
So in terms of the pilot itself, the plan was 2 years. Ben was really the only survivor for 2 years. No Fence had a completely unexpected system shutdown with the transition from 2G to 5G. Their equipment wasn't adaptable to the change. So in 2023, we had to shut everything down. Ben, you had 2G up your way, right? That was the deal?
We had
4G? Four. It worked with 4G, which they couldn't figure out either. It worked, but we ended up basically with a 1-year pilot. It was quite a scramble that year to keep Ben going. No Fence wanted to shut everybody down. So we got compressed into 1 year. But with that, so I was a little leery of what this was going to show in just 1 year. But I have to say that all 11 projects, 10 of the 11, Shelburne Farms was a shutdown because of the predators. But other than that, has been described, improved rotational grazing for the animals and for the forage, 5 minutes per move on your phone, significant labor savings. So high-end positive across the board, big or small animals. As we talked about, the sleeper issue, the effectiveness with exclusion zones, big point. And as Ben talked about, the value of the data that's stored in the phone, we're still mining. It also emerged as a viable alternative for vegetation management on the ski areas and the utilities we talked about. Some complicating issues, which I'll get into in a minute. And then the other, I think, important plus is the payback ratio, which Ben got into. I'm almost done with the 11 pilot combined report. And the payback ratios actually best with the smaller ruminants. But it's pretty uniform except for the solar array. It looks like you need scale for a payback on the solar array. But for goats and animals in pasture, cattle animals and goats for vegetation management, the payback ratios look promising.
Representative Brown.
Dan, what was the price for goats or sheep?
So it's $325 for cattle and $225 for the smaller ruminant, plus the subscription. Now get into the question you raised. The chief problem is that the upfront cost is something that's difficult for farmers to incur. So far, No Fence does not have a leasing arrangement. I'm looking into establishing some equivalent, and I'm making some progress. It turned out that the time that I had intended to devote to that got put into the 2G, 5G fiasco, and then putting together the pilot last year. But I'm back to that now, and there's encouragement of a revolving loan fund through what I'm doing. So I'm working on that issue. The issue of cell service is a problem. The spotty cell service showed up on Senator Westman's farm. showed up on the Washington Electric pilot. So that's an issue in terms of this finding broader rollout. Those are the two primary problems. In addition, there's the issue of predators for the smaller ruminant animals. And there, guard dogs, there are some possibilities that we're going to look to trial if we keep going. The batteries do deplete. Ben found that the first year. When he moved his animals every day, the batteries depleted and he had to bring them back to the barn and to confine the animals to remove the collars and charge the batteries up with it's a conventional system like your cordless drill. It's pretty much the same thing.
To that point, though, had something to do with the 2G versus 5G. And
They're searching.
yeah, there was something going on, but in this past season, we had no charging errors.
So, we need more data. 1 year is enough to raise the issue. But we need more data. And the final is what I talked about before, the width of the corridor for the utilities. That may limit us away from the distribution line. So we got to figure that issue out. So, that's kind of where we are. We have a pretty good record of more than a pretty good. We have a very good record of success. I would say exceeding expectations. And I'm not a cynical person, but I am a skeptical person. And healthy skepticism as to the function of this, that's my job, is the way I see it. And I think it for the most part, fair, exceeded expectations, fair?
I would say exceeded, yeah.
So I think based on that, it's worth carrying forward, and that's what I'm trying to do, is put together an advance of the pilot with the existing farms who are all interested, and then to expand it out to gather some additional data to confirm some of the other issues. I've also was approached by Vermont Covered, which I'm not sure people are familiar with. They're working on improving cell service coverage in the state. So we're looking at a collaboration. This is a demonstration of the need for cell service improvement. Their primary start is public safety, but this would show the build out to other sectors. So I'm working on that finance program, as I mentioned, and given the hours of the day, working on collaboration and education. So that's essentially where we are. I've got a couple more pictures. And I'll get done. But if you look in the top of the slide where there's that open area, there's the field, then there's the open area. The goats are just a little bit up in there in the top of that. And then right above the open area, that's where they haven't got to yet on the knotweed. And it's really quite remarkable what they do to eat the knotweed.
That's amazing. That stuff's wild.
Representative Listy.
Yeah, on that point, which I've been thinking about during your presentation, has to do with managing invasive species, which is a real crisis for Vermont forest land.
Yeah, I'm trying to write a grant for that purpose.
Because that is challenging and expensive. But
They love knotweed,
well, knotweed is one, but they're also in the silva grazing in
Honeysuckle, they
Yeah.
love honeysuckle.
Goats
Yeah.
love what we.
so that's a big concern as far as migratory bird. The deleterious, they're eating these, maybe they're Japanese berry, but it takes all the protein. They're thinking they're gaining protein, but then they're not surviving their return.
So, that's exactly where I'm trying to head, is to.
Anyway, that's an
advance this
issue.
out.
We, forest, whether it's forest ecology or forest management,
The
that's
public,
a critical
the
challenge.
public interest is there, right? Really more than ski areas, to be frank, there's.
Well, the utility line of skiers, that's really great, but
Yeah.
this is a critical.
Big public interest. So that's where I'm trying to take this exactly there. Done.
I'm going to just ask if we can let the presentation come to its conclusion, and then we'll get a question or two in.
Appreciate that. I just get some nice pictures. So back to the picture I showed of the ski area. The goats are on the other slide. They're up on an expert trail. And I've got them. That's the one I was trying to send you, Sonia, that you can hear the goats doing their thing. It's pretty cool. They're up there. Then this is the solar array, so that's the sheep with the collar, and that's the smaller ruminant collar, and in the solar array, you can see them. So that was our solar array trial, so that's my show and tell. We've had quite a bit of media coverage. So that's, if you go to the website, you can see some of all of the different trials have been covered. We were on CAX, the goats and the TV camera, they got along really well. That was a lot of fun. So it's picking up some impetus of its own. I guess my closing statement, Representative Nelson, all the time I did milk pricing, the only time the media ever showed up was when there was controversy. The benefit was sort of, yeah, sure, I don't believe you anyway, but if there was controversy, then I had microphones stuck in my face. With this, they really like this. It's kind of a cool thing. And we've had drone issues and all kinds of stuff. So it's actually, that's been an enjoyable part of the job, is having a good interaction with the media. Which
So lessons to be learned there, I'm sure.
So that's.
Great. Representative Nelson.
Yeah, wild parsnip, is that what I'm thinking of, wild celery?
Wild parsnip.
Wild parsnip, can you get the goats to eat that? And could we? What a terrible noxious nuisance weed.
Yeah, I actually, I can't speak to whether they'll eat it or not. I think they probably would with some training. Like,
It's toxic for
There's
humans. I don't know if it's.
yeah,
toxic
I
for animals or
don't
not,
know
but-
what the.
And we can eat knotweed, but we can't eat
Right,
that,
right,
so
right.
I don't know.
With the knotweed or the other invasives, are they eradicating it? Are they getting?
Good question. So actually, Kimberly, this is her specialty. And what she designed was a strip grazing that they would come in intensively for a week, then move to another area and then go back in. And that gets it down into the roots. We didn't get a chance to try that. That was one of the casualties of the COVID, of the 5G deal. So we just ran them to see. And the issue that came up is they like knotweed, but they don't want to just eat knotweed. So a bunch of them were actually breaking free and going out in the field and eating grass. So there's more work to be done with goats. Goats are tough. They're really something, but.
Representative Burt.
I just wondered if it'd be worth, because we use similar sensors for checking vacuum in our Sherwoods, and I wonder if one of those companies would be worth talking to that makes those, because our system works off of the internet, but the signal is bounced between sensors, so you can go out almost infinitely.
Yeah.
As long as the sensors are spaced out and can keep sending the signal back. They basically at 1,000 feet, they can't reach it. So, but if you had cows that were spaced out, obviously a lot of times they cluster in shade, but you can stick an individual sensor on a tree.
Yep.
At an increments of 500 feet, you can move those to where, once in a while if you needed to, but it just keeps sending a signal out. And then the cows would also, if they're spaced out, some would help to do that, but
Yeah,
then it's based on internet,
that's the deal. So that's.
There is, the second option on these collars is you can update their paddocks via Bluetooth. That means you got to stand there within 150 feet of the collar to do it via Bluetooth from your phone. The problem or challenge is they go sequentially, so 0, 1, 2, 3, and they're not quick to update. So it takes a while to go through 60 or 40 collars. So we brought these points to no fence, and they took that into. They definitely took that in, and they were looking at a way to maybe like somehow shotgun blast it out there so they could hit rather than going sequentially, a more efficient way to
So I
communicate.
think
with
that's the
customers.
fence system is more what you're talking about. You set up your infrastructure to communicate on the
it's
ramp.
probably more like, like the Western.
Yeah.
System.
But
It's really not, I'm on 500 acres,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of sensors, but.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't, it only takes you, one sensor every 500 to 1,000 feet to get it, you bump it, the signal, you keep jumping the signal out.
I to be continued.
Yeah, exactly.
One more question.
You hadn't really updated us on what's happening in the EU. I mean, this is sort of where they were first successful, and I just wondered if they're really making, big gains there.
John, I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I had my nose to the grindstone here. Good question. I will touch base and see how they're making out, because they absolutely shut down production in 2023. They had to retool they first had to figure out what was happening. And then they had to retool the system. But I know that they are now, where we started, they were in pilot for North America, and they're now rolling out in North America. So I assume the home country is doing well, but that's an assumption.
All right, well, very interesting update. Thank you. And if there are other questions, we can reach out to you. You had your contact information, I think,
Yeah.
at the very end.
And I'd like, as I said, I'm in the final, I'm late with the report because it's turned out to be more complicated than I thought to synthesize everything out to 1 year. But if I could, I'd like to come back when I have, more findings and a proposal of what I'd like to do next, because I would like some backup from you folks going forward. I've been here on when there's money, when there's no money. I've been here. I mean, when I worked here. So I'm absolutely sensitive to what I'm dealing with, but I think it's worth, from the public interest that we talked about in continuing, and the legislative support for this was very important. So I'd like to come back when I have a proposal.
Great. Well, thank you. Committee members, any thoughts before we stretch, Jack? Well, we will have you back. Let's take, do we have our next witnesses coming in virtually, or are they coming in person?
I don't know, I think in person.
Okay, well, maybe they're out in the hall. Well, let's take